She slid the paper across the table and said, "Just sign it, Mom. It's a formality." I looked at the paper, then I looked at my daughter, then I put down the pen. She didn't expect that. I could tell by the way her smile stayed on her face a half-second too long, the way a smile does when the person wearing it suddenly isn't sure it's working anymore. "Mom," she said. "I heard you," I said. And that was the beginning of the end of something I had spent 68 years trying to hold together. My name is Eleanor. I am 68 years old. I taught high school English for 31 years in a small town in Ohio, the kind of town where you know the name of the pharmacist's dog and the pharmacist knows yours. My husband, Gerald, died 3 years ago in April. Pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. We didn't have enough time to say everything we needed to say, which I have come to understand is always the case, no matter how much time you have. Gerald and I had one daughter. Her name is Diane. She is 41 years old. She has 2 children, my grandchildren, a boy named Cooper who is 12 and a girl named Bree who is 9. I love those children the way you love someone whose exodus genuinely surprises you with its goodness. Cooper has his grandfather's eyes. Bree has a laugh that sounds like it comes from somewhere deeper than a 9-year-old should be able to reach. I would do almost anything for those children. I want to be honest about that because it matters later. After Gerald died, I stayed in our house for 2 years. It was the right thing to do, I told myself, and then I told myself that again. And then one morning, I woke up at 3 a.m. and walked through every room and understood that I had been telling myself a story. The house wasn't keeping me close to Gerald. It was keeping me close to the absence of Gerald, which is a different thing entirely. The rooms were full of quiet, not peaceful quiet, the other kind, so I decided to sell. The house was paid off. Gerald had been careful about money, the kind of careful that comes from growing up without very much of it. When we sold, after the realtor's commission and a few small debts I cleared, I walked away with $260,000. For a retired schoolteacher in Ohio, that is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. That is the number that stands between me and having to ask someone for help. I want you to understand what that number meant to me. It meant I could choose. It meant I could rent a small apartment closer to town. The one I had already found on Birchwood Lane with the bay window and the garden-level patio and a landlord named Mr. Petrakis, who reminded me of a kind uncle. It meant I could visit Diane and the grandchildren without needing anything from them. It meant that if I got sick, I would not be a burden. Gerald had taught me, quietly, over years, that the greatest gift you could give the people you loved was to not need rescuing. I had that number. I had that choice. I had learned that lesson. Diane knew about the sale. She had helped me sort through some of Gerald's things, the tools in the garage especially, which I couldn't bring myself to touch for a long time. She was good during those weeks, patient. She brought food. She sat with me. I was grateful in a way I didn't always know how to say out loud. But somewhere between those weeks and the closing date, something shifted. I didn't see it right away. I want to be honest about that too. I am not someone who sees things clearly when I love the person standing in front of me. I never have been. It is, I think, both my best quality and the one that has cost me the most. The first thing that happened was small enough that I almost didn't register it at all. Diane called me 2 weeks before closing and asked if I had thought about what I was going to do with the money. I told her about the apartment on Birchwood Lane. I told her about Mr. Petrakis and the bay window and the patio. She was quiet for a moment in a way that had shape to it, the kind of quiet that means something is being decided. "I just wonder," she said, "if it makes sense to put it somewhere it can actually grow." I said I had a savings account and a modest CD that Gerald had set up, and I wasn't looking to take risks with money I couldn't replace. "I'm not talking about risks," she said. "I'm talking about being smart." I let it go. It was one conversation. She was my daughter. She worried about me. That was not a crime. The second thing happened at dinner, 3 days before closing. Diane had invited me over, made a pot roast, Gerald's favorite, and I appreciated that even if I wasn't sure it was intentional. Her husband, Marcus, was there, and the children, and it was a good evening. Cooper showed me a book report he had written, and Bree fell asleep on my shoulder before dessert, and I thought, this is what I have. This is still here. After the children were in bed, Marcus excused himself, and Diane poured us each a second glass of wine, and then she said, I've been talking to someone at Marcus's firm, a financial advisor. He thinks there's a really smart structure we could set up. For your money. So it's protected. Protected from what? I asked. She looked at me the way adults sometimes look at older people when they are trying to be patient. I recognized the look. I had been on the other side of it before, and I did not enjoy it from that side either. From taxes, from probate, from, if something happened to you and things got complicated, what would get complicated? Mom, she said, like my name was a small sigh. I'm asking a real question. I just want to make sure you're taken care of. I thanked her for dinner. I kissed her on the cheek. I drove home to the house that still had a week left of being mine. I did not sleep well that night. The closing happened on a Tuesday. I signed the papers in a room that smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee, and the realtor handed me a folder, and I drove to the bank and sat with a very young man named Daniel, who had kind eyes and helped me transfer the funds into my account. $260,000. I stared at the number on the screen until it stopped looking like a number and started looking like a door, my door. One I had earned the right to open or close myself. I told Diane that evening. She said, Great, Mom, that's great. She sounded like someone reading from a script they hadn't fully memorized. I'm going to sign the lease on Birchwood Lane on Thursday, I told her. About that, she said. About what? I was thinking you could just stay with us for a little while you figure things out. The guest room is just sitting there. I've figured things out, I said. Thursday. Birchwood Lane. She was quiet again. That shaped quiet. Okay, she said. But just, before you do anything with the money, can we just sit down together? Just the two of us? There are some things I want to go over with you. I said yes. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe because she was my daughter. Maybe because it had only been 3 years since I sat in a hospital room and watched the person I had built my life alongside simply stop. Maybe because loneliness will make you agree to things you would otherwise recognize as trouble. We met at her kitchen table on a Wednesday afternoon. Marcus was at work. The children were at school. She had made coffee and set out the good mugs, the ones she usually saved for guests, which I noticed and which told me she had thought about this more than she was letting on. There was a folder on the table. She opened it slowly and pushed it toward me. Inside were several pages. Legal-looking pages. The top one had my name on it, and Diane's name, and words I recognized individually but had to read twice in combination. Words like power of attorney, and financial management, and authorized representative. I am a retired English teacher. I spent 31 years teaching people how to read carefully, how to notice what words actually say, not just what you want them to say. I read those pages carefully. When I looked up, Diane was watching me with the expression of someone who had rehearsed a conversation and was now waiting for it to begin. This gives you control over my finances, I said. It's a management structure. For protection, this says you can make financial decisions on my behalf. In certain circumstances, if. What circumstances? Mom, it's standard language. It's what the advisor recommended. Which advisor? Marcus's colleague. I told you about him. I don't know this person. He's very well regarded. I'm sure he is, I said. What does he get out of this arrangement? She put her coffee mug down. What does that mean? It means I'd like to understand the whole picture before I sign something that gives another person authority over my money. I'm not another person. I'm your daughter. I looked at her. I thought about the pot roast. I thought about Bree asleep on my shoulder. I thought about all the dinners and all the phone calls in the weeks after Gerald died when she had been genuinely, recognizably good. I held all of that in my mind at the same time as I held the papers in my hand. "I know who you are," I said, and I put the pen down. She stared at it, at the pen on the table between us. "Mom, I'm not signing this. You haven't even." I read it. "You read it in 2 minutes. There's context you're missing. If you would just let me explain." Diane. I said her name the way I used to say it when she was 16 and trying to convince me of something she already knew wasn't true. She heard it. I watched her hear it. "I'm trying to help you," she said, and her voice had shifted, gone softer, and I recognized that shift too. I had been a teacher long enough to know the difference between someone who is genuinely hurt and someone who is performing hurt because it is the next tool in the toolbox. "I know you think you are," I said. "You're 68 years old. You're alone. You have over $200,000 sitting in a basic savings account. Do you understand how vulnerable that makes you?" "Vulnerable to what?" She waved a hand. "Scams, bad decisions, people like who?" She stopped. "Diane," I said, and I was careful now. Careful the way you are when you are walking on ice, and you have just felt it move under your foot. "Do you need money?" The silence that followed was long enough to answer the question. "Marcus and I are in a tight spot," she finally said. "His firm had a bad quarter. It's temporary. But we have the mortgage and the kids' school. And if I could just have access to some of your—" "No," I said. "Mom, no. I'm not asking you to give it to me. I'm asking you to let me manage it. It stays yours." No. She looked at me across the table. My daughter, 41 years old, the person I had driven to soccer practice and read to sleep and sat up with through fevers and heartbreaks and a miscarriage she had in her early 30s that she still didn't talk about. The person I had loved without condition for 4 decades. "You don't trust me," she said. "I trust you with my grandchildren," I said. "I trust you with dinner and holidays and phone calls. I don't trust anyone with my financial independence. Not because of you specifically, because of what that independence means to me." She pushed her chair back. She picked up the folder and held it against her chest like a shield. "Gerald would have wanted you to be taken care of." I stood up. I picked up my bag. I put on my coat. The room was very quiet. "Gerald spent 32 years making sure I could take care of myself," I said. "That's how I know he would have wanted this." I drove to Birchwood Lane. I sat outside in the car and looked at the bay window and thought about what had just happened. I did not cry. I had cried a great deal in the last 3 years, and I had learned, slowly, that there is a difference between grief that needs to come out and grief that is just weather, just the climate of loss you learn to live inside of. This was neither. This was something else, something cleaner and colder and, if I was honest with myself, something I had seen coming without letting myself look directly at it. I called Mr. Petrakis. I asked if we could move the lease signing to Thursday morning instead of Thursday afternoon. He said, of course. He said he'd have coffee ready. I thanked him and sat in the car a little longer and watched the light change in the bay window. The next morning, I called my bank. I spoke to Daniel with the kind eyes and told him I wanted to review my account security settings and set up some additional protections. He walked me through everything: beneficiary designations, transfer limits, 2-factor authentication, an instruction that any large transfer require a phone call from me directly, not just online authorization. Then I called an attorney. Not Marcus's colleague, my own. A woman named Patricia who had handled Gerald's estate and who had the quality I value most in people who handle important things, which is that she said exactly what she meant and nothing she didn't. I told her what had happened. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. "Do you want to set up a trust?" she asked when I finished. "Tell me what that means for someone like me," I said. She told me. We talked for an hour. At the end of it, I had an appointment for the following week. I did not call Diane. I waited for her to call me. She called 4 days later. Her voice was careful, measured. She asked how I was. I said I was well. She asked if I had thought any more about our conversation. I said I had. And, she said, I'm setting up a revocable living trust, I said, with Patricia handling it. Everything goes in. I remain the sole trustee while I'm living and competent. If something happens to me, a neutral third party steps in. Not a family member. The line was quiet. You went to an attorney, she said. I did, without talking to me first. My finances are not a conversation I need to have with you first, I said, and I said it gently, because she was still my daughter, and I was not angry. I was only clear. There is a difference. I had learned that too, somewhere along the way. Mom, I want you to know I wasn't trying to. I know what you were trying to do, I said. You were scared. You and Marcus are in trouble, and you were scared, and you looked at my account and you saw a solution. I understand that. I'm not judging you for being scared. I'm not even judging you for asking. But the answer is no. It was no last week, and it's no now, and it will be no regardless of how the question is framed. Silence. I love you, I said. I love Cooper and Bree more than I can tell you. I will be at every birthday and every recital and every Christmas morning that I am physically able to get to, but I will not sign anything that gives anyone else authority over what Gerald and I built together, not to protect you from hard times, not even to keep the peace. She was crying now, quietly. I could hear it in the spaces between her breathing. I'm sorry, she said, and it was small and genuine, the way genuine things usually are, without decoration. I know, I said. I didn't think about what it would feel like for you. I just saw a problem, and I thought, you thought I was the solution, I said. And I might have been, if you had asked me differently. If you had sat down and said, Mom, we're struggling. Can you help us? I would have had a very different conversation with you. I might have helped. I can't know that now. She didn't say anything for a moment. Can we start over? She said. We don't start over, I said. We just keep going. That's what families do. I moved into the apartment on Birchwood Lane on a Saturday in October. Mr. Petrakis helped me carry boxes, which I had not expected and which moved me more than I anticipated. He was 73 and wiry and carried more than I did without comment. The bay window looked out over a small courtyard with a maple tree that had gone full red for the season. I set up Gerald's old reading chair in front of it. I put his photograph on the shelf beside the window. I made coffee and sat in the chair and looked at the maple tree and thought about choices, about how many I'd had in my life and how many times I had given them away without realizing it, and how strange and necessary it felt to hold on to one now. Diane called the following Sunday. Not about money. She called to tell me Cooper had made the honor roll, and Bree had a part in the school play, and did I want to come to dinner on the 22nd. I said I would bring dessert. I did not bring up the folder. She did not bring up the folder. It sat somewhere between us, not gone exactly, but further away than it had been, small enough now that we could see past it if we both agreed to look in the same direction. I know that some people would have cut the tie entirely. I understand that impulse. There are stories where the clean break is the right ending, but I am 68 years old, and I have learned that most of the important relationships in a life are not clean. That the people who matter most to you are sometimes also the people who, in their own fear or need or blindness, reach for something they shouldn't. That doesn't make them villains. It makes them human. What I had now that I had not let myself have before was a clear line, not a wall, a line. You can love someone and still not cross the line for them. You can show up for birthdays and school plays and pot roasts and still say, plainly, this belongs to me. Gerald taught me that, not in so many words. He taught it in the way he lived, in the quiet daily insistence of a man who never confused generosity with surrender. I think about him most mornings when I sit by the bay window with my coffee, and the maple tree has gone bare now, and the courtyard is cold and still, and I am here, in this small apartment that is entirely mine, with my name on the lease and my money in a trust and my choices intact. I didn't lose a daughter. I didn't solve every problem. I didn't walk away feeling triumphant or righteous or any of the things you feel in stories where someone wins. I walked away feeling like myself. After a long time, in a way I hadn't expected to feel again, I walked away feeling like myself. And in that quiet, in that ordinary October morning light coming through the bay window, that was enough. It was, in fact, everything.